Welcome to episode 21 of Sport Vitamins. As a strength coach, I always like to steal things from other coaches, and today's guest is definitely one of those coaches I look up to. He's the strength coach of Gonzaga men's basketball and the host of Hoop Commitment Podcast, a great podcast I recommend to all of you guys. So without further ado, let's dive into this great conversation with Mike Nilson. Hello, Mike. Welcome on the show.
Oh, it's a huge honor to be here. I can't wait to connect with you.
Mike, you're definitely one of the coaches I look up to. I came across your show a few years ago, reached out to you. We've been in contact ever since. I really love your philosophy. I like what you do with your project, the Hoop Commitment. We go back to this later on during this conversation. And so it just made a lot of sense to have you on my show today to pick your brain. And I would like to start with a little background. So let's talk about your journey.
Well, it started probably when I was 5 years old. Started playing basketball. One of my idols growing up was my cousin Blue. He was about 4 years older than me, and he was a basketball player. And anything he did, I just loved. And so he'd be out in the street playing hoops. So, of course, I'd be out there with him. And so I became a good little basketball player. I think I really became dedicated to the game when I started watching Michael Jordan. That was just a huge pivotal moment in my life to see someone flying through the air with this tongue wagging. I just never seen anything like that before. And I think that's when I kind of slowly kind of ratcheted up my dedication to the game of basketball and decided I want to be a professional basketball player. And I was always a really good player. In high school, I was MVP of the league. I played varsity all 4 years. But when it came time to sign a Division I scholarship, I didn't have one offer. And that was a little heartbreaking because I'd already told everyone my dreams and goals. And so going into my senior year, I made a commitment. I said, I'm going to carry a basketball with me everywhere I go until the day I sign a Division I scholarship. And I remember showing up to school that first day. I had my basketball in my hand, and people kind of looked at me a little strange. They thought maybe it was just a fad, or, maybe I was, just going to do this for a day or two. But boy, after a week, after a month, I took it to class with me. I ate lunch with it, dinner with it. I had a special place on my pillow for my basketball. And
so you also went to the prom with it, right? That's the picture.
Oh yeah, I took it everywhere. Yeah, my girlfriend, I remember when I rang the doorbell, her mom answered the door and saw me with the basketball, with my tie on and everything. And she's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And she didn't even know the half of it. I took, school dance pictures with my basketball. And, I've always just loved that idea of commitment, making your mind up and not necessarily, making goals. I think goals are super important. But what's even more powerful than a goal is the daily actions you're going to do to attain that goal. And so, of course, I had a goal of being a Division I basketball player. But what's even more important than that is what am I going to do every day to help me achieve that goal? And that's where the commitment comes in. And so I carried that basketball everywhere with me. I had a great senior year, but still no Division I scholarship. And so I ended up walking on at Gonzaga University, which was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. It's the hardest decision, going on to campus. I was a walk-on, redshirt freshman, the lowest, man on the totem pole. And I was carrying that basketball with me everywhere I went. And that was a challenging year, but I made it through, ended up earning a scholarship. And then I had a 3-year scholarship, just had a great career there. It was not just awesome for basketball, but all the personal relationships. I love all my teammates. My old roommates, we still are best friends to this day. And the most impactful thing in my life happened. I met my wife there. And so that was, I owe a lot to Gonzaga. And then ended up playing a couple years over in Germany. And, unfortunately, my basketball skill, my basketball talent was not enough to bring me to the NBA. But I got to play for a couple years. And then now I've been a strength coach for the last 20 years, which has been almost as fun, and now I still get to work with basketball. But now I get to do the stuff that I was really talented at, which is the strength conditioning piece, the nutrition piece. I've always been drawn to the leadership piece, the idea that the sum of the parts could be greater than the individual pieces. So that leadership part has just been a huge part of my basketball journey too.
I didn't know you went pro for 2 years. How was the experience?
Yeah, so it was so fun. Going into my senior year at Gonzaga, I had big plans of having a long professional career. had a great senior year. I was a WCC Defensive Player of the Year. And then going into the first round of our conference tournament, I was, it was the first round. I caught the ball on the wing, and I penetrated to the center of the lane. And all of a sudden, I felt this big pop in the back of my leg. And I thought someone had like thrown a baseball or hit me with a bat in the back of the leg. I fell down. It hurt so bad. I remember turning around, looking at the crowd, wondering who hit me. And when I looked behind me, there was no one there. And that's when I knew I was in trouble, and I'd ruptured my Achilles tendon. So my teammates helped me off to the bench. And I remember the team doctor kind of whispered in my ear, "Hey, you're done. Proud of you. What a great senior year." And that was just devastating to know that my basketball season, my career at Gonzaga was finished. And so for that next year, I just rehabbed, and I was really trying to think what I want to do with my life. And up until that point when I was in, junior high, it was also, it was always like, hey, I want to play high school basketball. When I was in high school, I wanted to play college. At college, I didn't even know what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew I wanted to play professional basketball. So to have my dreams just kind of crushed in that moment, knowing I wasn't going to be able to play for a year, I was really confused. But I had a good mentor that said, hey, why don't you do strength conditioning? That's what you're really good at. I was never the best basketball player. I wasn't the best shooter, but I was really drawn to the weight room. I was drawn to things that made you a little quicker, a little faster, a little stronger, a little bit, better balance. And so I thought, man, what if I gifted athletes with that same gift that I was given? So that's when I decided I'd be a strength coach. So for that year, I rehabbed. I worked at a local gym doing strength conditioning. I went back and got certifications. Gonzaga let me go back and take anatomy, physiology, and lab classes. And in return, I trained the basketball team. So it was a great year of just getting experience training athletes, but my heart was still with playing. And so I rehabbed for that year. And one of my assistant coaches had played in Dusseldorf, Germany, and said, hey, we have one of our other players there. And it just so happened that over winter break, one of the Americans had to come back and have knee surgery. And so I just took their spot, finished out the season, got married, and then went back and played another season in Dusseldorf. And I made a ton of good friends there. It was a great experience. I actually signed to go back for a third season. And the day before the night before I was supposed to leave, the team told me, don't come back. We're having some issues. And then from there, it was me, flying down to LA to do, summer league stuff, getting an agent, just trying to get exposure stuff. I did like the EA Sports travel tour teams where we played 12 of the top 25 Division I teams in the preseason. And I was a good player, but just not the kind of player that was going to be able to find a good paying job in a good country. And so after about 6 months of chasing that dream and running out of money, I decided, you know what, I think someone might be trying to tell me something. So I hung up my shoes and became a strength coach.
And what's the biggest takeaway from that experience as a professional player?
I just tell people to follow your dreams. I didn't have the longest professional career. I didn't, make any money really, but I have the experience. And I think, that to be able to live in another country and meet new friends and appreciate a new culture and just to grow was maybe even more important than the basketball was the experience. And so when I have athletes tell me, hey, I have a chance to play overseas, I never ask them what kind of money they're making or, what division they're in. I just say, do it, live. You only have so much time to be able to, take a year off and live a dream. And so for me, that was something that I just have no regrets for. I never look back and say, I wish I would have. I really played that NBA dream or that professional dream as long as it could. I ran out of money. My wife and I were living with my parents. And then once it got to a point where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to contribute in a way that I want to on the basketball court. And so where else can I serve? Where else can I contribute? So I think just that idea of, following your passions is pretty important.
Sure. There's a good friend of mine now is the head coach of agility team. He always say, chase opportunities, not money.
I love that. What a great quote.
And how much of of what you were as a player is reflected now in what you are as a coach?
Boy, most of it. I think you only really can teach what you know. And so, my strength conditioning, my nutrition, my leadership is not the best program. It's not the only way, but it's my way. And I think that'll be the right message for some players. And I think the great thing is it doesn't all fall on me. We have a great team at Gonzaga. We have 3 other strength conditioning coaches that I learn from all the time, and that I've given permission to talk with my athletes and share stuff with me so we can give them the best well-rounded experience. I'm a good nutritionist. I'm not the best nutritionist, and my philosophy is not the only way. And so we have great registered dietitians. Another one of our strength coaches, a nutritionist. And so, boy, I utilize them a lot. I'll have an athlete that I'm struggling with that, we can't find a good solution for. And I'll say, hey, why don't you go see Nick, or why don't you go see Michael or Travis? And so I think that's been huge. I think I get in trouble when I try and be something I'm not, when I try and coach in a way that doesn't quite fit with my paradigm that I coach through. And that's not to say that it's wrong. It's just, I think I have to be authentic and really stick to my strengths and talents. And so I think if you look back at the way I played basketball, like I said, I started every game my senior year, but I only averaged about 3 points a game. I wasn't a huge scorer. Where I was able to contribute was pursue every rebound, stay in a stance every single second, be focused, win every loose ball. And I think what's great is those kind of things always contribute to the team, never take away. And so I'm just big on that idea of just having a growth mindset, being gritty, being tough, being consistent. And so that's really the message that I want to pass along to my athletes, because I think it's bigger than basketball. Those same life lessons will help them become great parents, great business owners, great coaches, so they can pass along that message one day.
Yeah, and probably this kind of experience also brought you to shape and molded your philosophy, right? And your philosophy has 3 main pillars. Do you want to break it down for us?
Yeah, I had a really cool aha moment about 10 years ago now. I was on vacation. My family, I have a big family. I have a sister, 3 younger brothers. We all have kids. My parents, once a year, my dad, as a gift to all of us, takes us on a week-long vacation. And so that's one of my favorite times of year, just because I get to be with all my brothers and sisters and the nieces and nephews. It's just such a great time. But I also love to step away from what I'm doing. Sometimes when you're in the weeds, it's hard to be able to see the big picture. And so usually by the end of that week of just kind of laying on the beach and not having a phone, not having a computer, I really have some good reflections and some good insights. And one of the questions I asked myself was, if I had all the money in the world, if I won the lottery and had $1 billion, what would I do with my life? And the thing that came back to me was, I would really do 3 things. I would still dig into nutrition, I would dig into strength conditioning, and I would dig into leadership, because I don't do those things for the money. I don't read a leadership book so I can get a new certification or make more money. I do it because it touches my soul. I don't learn about training because I have to. I mean, I have this, I'm just drawn to it. It's really interesting. I've always been intrigued with how the human body works and how the mind, body, spirit all comes together to just create this miracle of a person. And so I just thought, that's so cool. Like, I'm already doing what I love. But the one tweak to it, though, was I was training a lot of different kinds of athletes, which I love, but the reason I loved it was not because of the sport. It was because of the personal connection. When I really thought back about training a golfer or a soccer player, I really felt like I was doing them an injustice because I didn't understand the game or didn't have a passion for their game. So when I was trying to talk about the importance of having internal rotation in your hip for a golfer, I didn't really know exactly all the lingo, or, I kind of felt like I was being an imposter. If I was training a tennis player, hey, with your backhand or your forehand, and pretty soon my technical jargon was gone. I didn't have any more, I didn't really have all the different ways to talk about this sport. If you asked me, name the top 3 soccer players in the world, I'd be at a blank, But what I really love is nutrition, training, leadership for basketball. And I think what's really cool is nutrition for basketball is different than nutrition for cross country or nutrition for golf. Training for basketball is different than training for cross country or golf. Even leadership is different. And so that's when I decided 10 years ago, I was really going to evolve this eat, train, lead model specifically for basketball, basketball specific nutrition, basketball specific training, basketball specific leadership. And the beauty of this is, you know, I love that quote you talked about, you know, pursuing the opportunities, your passion, not the money. I think what's great about this is I'm so confident that Hoop Commitment will live on for a lot of years because it has nothing to do with money. I don't make one penny off the podcast. I don't sell any advertising because I don't do it for the money. I do it because I get to connect with people like you. I'm so excited to have you on my show, not for the ratings, not for the money, just because I want to learn how you do it. It's just something inside of me that really wants to be able to learn so I can apply it to myself. I want to become, you know, a better athlete. I want to apply it to my kids who love basketball. I want to apply it to my athletes. And I think when you're driven by passion and not by money, then I think the whole world opens up. And so that's what Hoop Commitment is about. If you love basketball and you're interested in all the stuff outside of the court, because like I said, I was not the best skilled player. I wasn't the best shooter, the best ball handler. That stuff, don't get me wrong, is so important. It's just not what I'm able to teach. I look on Instagram and I see these skill coaches, and what they're able to give to athletes is way more in depth and better than what I can give. But what I can contribute is the nutrition, the training, and the leadership piece that happens outside the court. And those three things will only impact and improve and enhance your skills. So yeah, that's the journey I've been on for the last 10 years. And I think if you talk to me in 10 years, I'll be doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I want to learn how you do things. So let's talk about nutrition first. What's your first intervention when you have a new player? Because we all know that most of the time when we have young athletes, they don't have good eating habits, which is something that unfortunately holds true also when you have professional athletes. So what's the first intervention that you do with these guys?
I always like to look at stuff through the lens of the power of three. And I got to give credit to Dr. Gary Gray for this. I'm a fellow of applied functional science, and 10 years ago, I went through the 40-week fellowship program, and he taught me that 3 is a magic number on planet Earth. And it's pretty interesting when you look at how things are broken down in nature, you see 3 happen over and over again. You know, the tripod is the most stable structure on planet Earth. You take away one leg of the tripod, and it's no longer stable. If you add a 4th leg to the tripod, you add complexity without adding equal value. So 3 is the simplest form of complexity. And we see it in other things like colors. Every color on planet Earth is made of just 3 primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. That's it. Those 3 colors make up the whole. And then we look at strength conditioning in our world. We know there's only 3 ways our body can move. It can move in the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane. Those are the only 3 rotations. And so it's pretty interesting to look and say, like, the simplest form of complexity is 3. So when I look at nutrition, I started thinking, how can I break down nutrition into a simple 3-step process where I really understand it, where, you know, I don't miss anything, is complete, but it's the simplest form of complexity. And I think that's so important, because if you bring in 10 nutritionists, you're probably going to get 10 different ideas of what good nutrition is. And now if I'm a basketball player that wanting to become my best, you know, learn how to fuel my body, and then I think, well, if the experts can't even agree, if the experts don't even know, how am I supposed to know? And I think when you get to that place of confusion, you get paralyzed. And a lot of great athletes that want to do the right thing will throw their hands up because they're hearing, oh gosh, I got to go vegan. Oh, now I got to do the carnivore, all meat diet. You know, milk is bad, milk is good. And I think instead of having it motivate them, I think it takes them to a spot where they say, you know what, I'll just do what I've always done. And I think that's just so sad, because we know nutrition is literally 100% of the energy that athletes will use on the court is derived from the food that they eat. And when they do strength conditioning, every pound of muscle they gain will be made of the food that they eat. And so nutrition is just crucial to their performance, to their health, to their body composition. So what I've done is I thought, well, I got to have the 3 levels of basketball nutrition. And what I kind of kind of have this like video game philosophy where you can't make it to level 2 of nutrition unless you pass level 1. And there's no way we can talk about level 3 nutrition if you're not concurrently doing level 1 and level 2. And so level 1, the foundation of all nutrition, is fuel. It's the truth that food is fuel for your body, just like gasoline is fuel for your car. And a lot of athletes think they understand this, but when push comes to shove, they don't. Because if they were driving a big long road trip, you know, I live about a 5-hour drive from Seattle. That's where my town is from. And so I said, if you were driving to Seattle and you had a quarter tank of gas, if you were on empty, would you ever say, man, I don't have time to stop and eat, I got to get to Seattle? That would be crazy. Not one person, not one. If I interviewed 1,000 athletes that were going to drive to Seattle and they had an empty tank, every single one of those 1,000 athletes, the first thing they would do, even though they're in a hurry, they would go to the gas station and put gas in their tank, because they know they can't make it to their destination. They'll never make it to their goals, their dreams, on an empty tank. It just won't work, because they know the truth that gasoline is fuel for the car. But yet I see this on a weekly basis. I'll have athletes come in and they'll be dragging, they'll be having, you know, different little nagging injuries. And I always go to, what have you eaten today? Coach, now listen, before you judge me, I didn't have time, coach. I had early morning class, then I had practice, then I went right to weights, then I had another meeting with my teacher. I didn't have time to eat. And I'm like, dude, well, you don't understand level 1. You got to make time, right? And so I think that's so important, that the amount and the timing of what you eat is the most important thing you can do. If we want to talk about getting protein in, if you want to talk about the importance of essential healthy fats, well, we can't talk about that first if you're not eating anything. If you're not eating at the right time, we can't talk about eating fruits and vegetables. Of course, fruits and vegetables are important, but I'd rather have you have a burger and fries than nothing. And so the first thing I do with athletes when they sit down is I just talk to them. Tell me about your goals. Tell me what you have done. Tell me about your likes, your interests. I want to get to know them, and I want to find out why they're eating, because you could eat for a lot of different reasons. You can eat for body composition. You can eat for performance. You can eat for comfort. You can eat for, a whole host of reasons. So I want to find out where they're going. And then when I start to be able to help them, the first thing I do is I'm going to help them with the food, the frequency and the amount that they eat. Now, if they're doing that well and they're eating 5 to 6 times a day at the right times, perfect. I love it. Then the next thing I do is I say, you've earned the right to go to level 2, which is fire. So level 1 is fuel. Level 2 is fire. And one of my nutritionists, my old sports nutritionist when I was in college, his name's Craig Hunt. He's a great guy. He told me this analogy that always stuck with me. And he said, you want to build a meal, you want to build a plate of food just like you build a fire. If I was building a fire, I wouldn't want to have just one energy source. I'd want to have multiple energy sources, right? The first thing I want to do is get quick burning fuel, things like pieces of paper that light up really quick. That's essential. But if I had a fire with just paper, it wouldn't last very long. And so that's why I need different energy sources. The next thing I do is I gather kindling or sticks, and I could, kind of create that teepee-like structure of the fire. That was the second thing I do. And then the third thing I do is I want to have that long-lasting fuel, that big log on the fire. And he said, that's exactly how you should build a meal or build your plate. Carbohydrates are quick-burning fuel, just like paper. They light up fast. So if I have an apple or if I have a piece of a toast or a bagel, plan on giving me energy for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then it shoots back down. That's what paper does. And that's not good or bad. It's just how carbohydrates function, the quick burning fuel. And that's why you need a medium energy source. You need that kindling or those sticks to create the structure of the fire. Well, that's what protein does. Protein creates every structure in the human body, not just every muscle, tendon, bone, but every fingernail, inch of skin, hair, everything in your body is created from the protein that we eat. And the cool thing about protein is it's a medium energy source. It doesn't burn up as fast as carbohydrates. And the biggest mistake I made when I was an athlete was I was afraid of fat. I had fat-free milk, fat-free yogurt, fat-free everything, because I grew up in the 90s and nutritionists taught me back then that fat was bad. But athletes have to think about food as not just fuel, but food as a fire. And fat is that big log that creates long-lasting energy. So things like, cashews and almonds and peanut butter and avocados, those things are going to give you the long-lasting energy that's going to sustain you throughout a long practice. And so once my athletes pass level 1 and they have the right amount of fuel at the right time, then I look at those meals and say, do you have enough carbohydrates post-workout? Do you have enough protein for lunch? Are you getting any fat in your breakfast to sustain your energy? And if they're not, well, that's where we go to. There's no need to go to level 3. But if they've done that, if they pass level 1, they have the right amount of fuel, they pass level 2, they've built a good fire, then they earn the right to talk about level 3, which is food. Fuel, fire, food. And people kind of look at me crazy when I say level 3 is food. Well, doesn't everyone eat food? No. Most people eat food-like substances. I'm talking about whole foods. And I consider anything a whole food where the name of the food is the ingredient of the food. So I know that a cashew is healthy because the ingredient of a cashew is cashew. I know that chicken is healthy. There's a lot of people that will say, oh, red meat's bad for you. Well, I know that beef is good for you because the ingredient of steak is steak. Now, I'm not saying it's good for everyone. I'm personally, maybe allergic to bananas. So bananas are healthy. Don't get me wrong. The ingredient of a banana is a banana, but banana might not be right for me. But to try and tell me that I'm going to throw out a whole food to me is crazy, because the only way to make a whole food is by combining the power of the sun and mixing it with the nutrients of the earth. That's the only way. The smartest scientists in the world can teach us how to, can tell us what's in an apple. They can tell you how many grams of fiber, how many vitamins, minerals, how many carbohydrates are in an apple. The smartest scientists in the world can't create an apple. Only the power of the sun mixed with the nutrients of the earth. And so when my athletes make it to that level, what we've done is now they have the right amount of meals at the right time for level 1. They have the right ratio of protein, carbs, and fats. And level 3 is all about sacrifice. It's about giving up something good for something better. I might look at their breakfast and they might be having a Pop-Tart as their carbohydrate or pastry. And I might say, that's good, right? That's a good way of getting carbohydrates in. What if we got some whole grain bread, right? Or what if we traded out the pastry for some oatmeal, some steel cut oats? What if we, traded out the blueberry muffin for some real blueberries? And now we start taking these food-like substances and adding in whole foods. And to me, I think once you get to that level, you're in great shape. And so that's how I do my food consultations. I don't just tell the athletes what to eat. I let them know the 3 levels. And it's amazing. Athletes are smart. Once they understand the 3 levels, they can be their own best sports nutritionists. Because if I just tell them what to eat, they're going to fail. Because if I tell them, hey, for lunch, you got to have chicken and you got to have rice. Well, the minute they go to the Italian restaurant and there's no rice, they're going to be in trouble, right? But if they understand they need quick burning fuel, if they understand that they need, whole foods, if they understand the importance of just getting the right amount of food in, they're going to be in great shape.
Wow, I love it. I think that the fire analogy is brilliant. I'm going to use it starting from tomorrow with my athletes.
Well, that's what I love about you. I was actually, I don't follow a whole lot of Instagram accounts because sometimes I get caught in the weeds and caught in the noise, but I really love yours. First off, because you do such a great job with progression. I love that you don't go to the really cool, complicated thing first. You start with simplicity and you progress the athletes. So I love that you do that. The other thing I love that you do is you give credit to other people. You never say, this is something that I invented. This is all mine. You say, I learned this from this strength coach. And so I've always admired that about you, is that you're always learning from other people to help your athletes. And so, yeah, that's cool. I hope you take that fire analogy because it's not mine. I took it from my nutritionist. So it's kind of fun. We'll keep passing along through generations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I try to learn and steal from all the coaches that I like. So, all right, let's talk about training now. What's your philosophy about training and what's your philosophy in the weight room?
Well, this has been my most challenging power of 3 to create. The one that I'm probably least versed in, the one that I have the least amount of experiences in is nutrition. But that came the easiest for me. That one, when I kind of molded the 3 levels of basketball nutrition, that really made a lot of sense. And, you know, I think I kind of formulated that over the course of a day or a month. The leadership one was more challenging. That took me a couple of years to really formulate the 3 levels of leadership. I've been a strength coach for 20 years. Excuse me. And I'm still developing the 3 levels of basketball training. But here's where it's at today, which is drive, defend, and dominate. And I use those 3 words. They have multiple meanings, but I start at the beginning, which is when a basketball player comes to see me, they're really not coming to see me because they want to get stronger. They're not coming to see me because they want to jump higher. They're coming to see me because they want to become better at basketball. Because if I get them stronger and they're still sitting on the bench, it doesn't matter. If I get them faster, if I get them jumping higher and they don't get any better on the basketball court, I've missed the boat. They're coming to me because they want to become better at basketball. Now, maybe, you know, there are people that come to me because they want to have bigger biceps. Well, that's something different. We could do that for fun. I like that. But if it doesn't help you on the court, that energy that you took to do those extra sets of curls, man, why don't you shoot some free throws? Why don't you get some ball handling in? Because that's what's really going to help us get gains. Now, for sure, don't get me wrong. I love the leadership piece. I love the confidence thing. There is value in having big biceps. Like I said, that's how I was able to play the game of basketball. I was a little stronger. There's that mental confidence that comes when you step on the court and the guy I'm guarding, I know I can outwork. I know that he's going to try and get that rebound, but I'm going to weight room him. I'm going to push him out. I'm going to give him a stiff forearm. I love that. There is that confidence, but I always come back to, and what I'm doing, making them a better basketball player. And so that's why I love, there's 3 main things I think basketball players have to be able to do. They have to be good at offense. And so that's why I say drive. You got to be great being able to penetrate, whether you're going to dish, whether you're going to pull up the jumper, whether you're going to make it to the rack. You have to be better at driving. So if I'm making you a better basketball player, I got to think, how can I get you better on offense? So that's the drive piece. The defend piece is pretty obvious. I got to get you quick for basketball. Well, there's a lot of different ways to be quick. You could be quick in boxing. That's not going to make you a better basketball player necessarily. I love the stuff you've been posting on social media. We got to be specifically quick in that frontal plane with rotation. You know, shuffling is a really unique skill to basketball because it's going to be different than what you see on the soccer field. It's going to be different than what you see on the volleyball court. And so when I'm designing my programs, I'm thinking, is this making them a better defender? And then the third thing is they have to be able to dominate their space, whether that's in transition, whether that's fighting for a rebound. But the idea of, can I be the best athlete in basketball on offense, defense, and in transition? So that's drive, defend, dominate. And just like the 3 levels of nutrition or like the 3 levels of leadership, I kind of use it as a video game. You can't really work on level 2 if you haven't worked on level 1. And there's no way we should be working on level 3 if you haven't passed the first 2 levels. So when I think about the first level of basketball, that drive, I think about driving into specific transformational zones. And this is some language that I took from the Gray Institute. I'm a facilitator for the GIFT program now, the 40-week fellowship program. So if anyone's listening, you know, and interested in my strength conditioning philosophy, it's pretty much really founded in the Gray Institute, because 20 years when I first became a strength coach, I was lucky enough to connect with my 2 business partners that are physical therapists. And they said, you got to listen to this Gary Gray person. And for them, it was mind blowing because they had gone the traditional route of physical therapy and learned about the individual parts first. And they learned how this one little ankle works, but they didn't understand how the ankle impacted the knee and how the knee impacted the hip and the hip impacted the spine. And so when they learned about Gary Gray, they had to totally unlearn the thought process they had learned in physical therapy school. And I just got really lucky because when I learned about Gary Gray, I didn't know anything about the human body. So I got to learn starting from scratch that, of course, if you have turf toe, that could cause you to have, tendonitis in your shoulder because the big toe is connected to the shoulder. That wasn't a big stretch for me because that was just the way I was taught. And so as we go through and we talk about transformational zones or, 3 planes of motion, that's coming directly from Dr. Tiberio and the Gray Institute. And so when I say drive, what we talk about is we always want to drive our athletes into position. So when I reach for something, my hand is considered the driver. And so right now I'm sitting down on my chair. If I take my right hand and I reach up as high as I can and I rotate as far as I can to the right, I'm focused on my right hand. But even while I'm sitting, if you look at my left heel, my calcaneus is inverting. And what's kind of amazing is something like a driver like my hand impacts my whole body. It can impact my foot. And so we have all these drivers in our body. When I do a lunge, my right foot might be the driver. And that right foot causes a chain reaction on my whole body. And so level one, when I talk about drive, I say, well, if athletes can't drive into a sport-specific direct drive lunge, if they can't drive into a nice defensive squat, what am I doing trying to strengthen it? What am I doing trying to do plyometrics, trying to load it? So the first thing I have to do is make sure that they can drive into every basketball specific position they need to be on the court. If you can't get into a deep squat, you're probably not going to be a very good defender. If you can't go into a deep direct drive lunge, well, then I got to look and say, what's inhibiting you? Is it your ankle dorsiflexion? Is it hip extension? Is it thoracic rotation? Whatever that might be. And so that's the base level for me with my programming, is making sure the athletes have the mobility, they have the stability, they're able to drive into these basketball specific positions, these transformational zones. And if they do that well, then they've earned the right to get to level 2, which is defend. And I love that idea of kind of that mentality of how do you stay in a defensive stance? How do you have the strength to be able to, and conditioning to be able to last? And so if they're able to drive into that position, can they defend it? Yeah, I can drive into a squat, but now can I stay there for long enough? Do I have the strength? And so now that they have the mobility to be able to get in those positions, now I'll start strengthening those. And you can load them a whole different host of ways, whether that's through a barbell or kettlebell or bands or balls, doesn't matter. There's a ton of great philosophies that I don't claim to have great insights into. Just like you, I like to steal from a lot of different people. I take simple ways of doing it. Even something like a Wendler 5-3-1 program. I really enjoyed a book like that where I look at the principles that it's based upon, things like progression and specific adaptation to impose demand. I love that idea of what are the principles and now how am I going to formulate a strategy through that? And I think if you can do that well, if you can have the range of motion and drive in the basketball specific transformational zones, and then you can defend those positions, you have strength, whether that's endurance or we're going to be on that progression for maybe brute strength to power or speed. That's probably more on the strength part of it. And I think if you do that well, then you earn the right to get to that level 3, which is to dominate. And that's when I'm starting to tweak some of those elements like speed, quickness, reaction. So yeah, I can get in the squat, but can I dominate that position? Can I get in and out of it quickly? Can I react? Can I move in all 3 planes of motion? And so that's kind of how I think about my strength conditioning program. When a freshman comes in, they might already pass level 1. They might have great mobility. They might be able to move really well. And we might have to go right to level 2, which is, can I defend those positions? We're going to have athletes that pass level 1 and pass level 2. They've had, either through great genetics, they can thank their parents, or through great training. We get to move to some of that fun stuff. But I love that idea of progression, of going all the way through. And so then when we lose our way, just like in nutrition, we kind of talked about, training's not a whole lot different than nutrition. It's kind of, what have you done for me lately? Because with nutrition, it's not what you know, it's what you're able to do. And so if I know that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but I skip breakfast today, it doesn't matter what I know, it's what I do. And so I have to look at these athletes. They might be seniors. They might be athletes that have been with me for 4 years. If they're not eating breakfast, I'm not going to talk to them about level 2 or level 3. I'm going to talk to them about level 1. That's what we have to work on. Again, we have to build the habit of simply eating breakfast. So elementary, but it's what they need. If athletes get injured, they might be, a senior all league. They might be level 3 dominating their space. But if they have an ankle sprain, I got to go back to level 1 and make sure I restore that mobility. Can they drive their ankle into all 3 planes of motion? And once they're able to do that, can we defend that? Can we build up strength, whether we're using BOSU balls or AirX pads or bands or, whatever that might be. And then when they're able to defend their space? Now can we dominate it? Can they go single leg, multi-directional hops with their eyes being driven in all different directions while they're catching a basketball, while I have a bungee cord around and pulling on and pushing on them? Whatever those crazy things we can think of, I love that idea of being able to use that, the simplest form of complexity, drive, defend, and dominate. And once again, it's not perfect, but it's kind of what I know in the framework I'm able to see things through.
Again, I love your philosophy. It just makes sense to me on so many levels. And for example, I was familiar already with the first level after a conversation that I had last summer with Todd Wright, who's one of the strength coaches of the Los Angeles Clippers now. And he said the first thing that he does with NBA players is make sure that they can drive into basketball-specific positions. And that's with a very, very high-level basketball players,
Well, yeah, I think what you'll find is the higher level basketball player doesn't mean a higher level functioning person, human being. They probably masters at compensating. Just because you are great at basketball, it doesn't mean that you can get into a good squad. It just means that you've been able to compensate and cheat and find a way to be able to do it a different way, which is super helpful in the short run, but could lead to injuries in the long run, because the more you have to compensate and the less one joint helps, that means another joint has to take up the slack. And you only could do that for so long. And so some of these athletes that are lacking these ankle mobility, well, yeah, the knees and the hips, the spine, everything will be able to take up the slack and help out and maybe do more than their part. But you don't want the knee doing more than its part in the frontal and the transverse plane. You just don't. That's a recipe for disaster over time. And so if we can't gift the ankle with the ability to evert, to pronate, to be able to, to land, to be that flexible adapter, the more the foot's able to move in all three planes of motion, we have to be able to unlock that subtalar and mid-tarsal joint. And then we can do that. Well, then the knee doesn't have to do more than its share. And so I think those high-level athletes probably need this more than anyone, because a low-level athlete is not playing 82 games in a regular season. A normal athlete is probably going to be sitting behind their desk in school or sitting behind their desk working all day long, and they might go play hoops for an hour a day, 3 days a week, right? It's kind of like a runner. If I'm not a very good runner, I might run 5 miles in a week. If my form is not that good, it's not a huge deal, because I'm only getting 5 minutes of 5 miles of mileage every week. Now, if you're running 100 miles a week, boy, and you have one little glitch in the system, that's going to show up to be overuse and chronic injury over time. And so I think that level one of making sure that they have the proper motion is great. And the best tool I know how to do, the best tool I know for this is 3D maps. The Gray Institute has a great online certification. For what you get, it's a super affordable, well worth every single penny. And I do it with every one of my athletes. They come in, and the first thing I do is I watch them play basketball, because I want to see them in their environment. We're going to sit down, we're going to find out what their goals are, what they've done, just be able to get their history, learn about their heart, learn about how they connect the weight room to the basketball court. So that's the most important assessment I think we could do, is be able to get to know the person. The second thing I do is I watch them play basketball, because if I want to help someone become a better basketball player, but I don't know how they play basketball, it's really difficult to do. But the third thing I do is I do 3D maps with them. And it's pretty amazing that the Gray Institute's developed 6 movements that look at every single motion in the human body. In these 6 lunges, you're able to see the 6 different directions the ankle goes in. So I can see, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, eversion, inversion, abduction, adduction. I can look at the 6 motions of the knee. I can look at the 6 motions of the hip. I can look at the 6 motions of the thoracic spine. And just 6 motions, 6 lunges and reaches allow you to see 66 motions of these joints. And so it's pretty amazing to look at the big picture. And I always think, before we can dive into the part, we have to see the whole. And so anyone that's out there listening, 3D maps, I can't say enough great stuff about it.
That's the next course that I will do for sure. It's already on my
list. Well, email me. I get a nice discount since I teach the Gray Institute. I'll be happy to pass it along to you.
Great. Good to know. All right. Let's talk about leadership now. Because of you, I got really into it and I started an online course on leadership 3 weeks ago. So, where does the passion about leadership come from?
Well, I really believe that leadership is the most important skill in the game of basketball. I really, really, really believe that. More important than shooting, dribbling, and passing. And I know sport coaches are probably going to hammer me right now. Players are probably going to crush me right now. But here's why I really believe that. One is because I could be the greatest shooter in the world, but once I retire from the game of basketball, that skill, I don't think impacts very many lives anymore. Whereas leadership is something that you continue impacting lives as long as you're breathing. And if you're someone like you that's creating a podcast or writing a book, or someone that was a coach that passed along those skills to their players, you're going to live on forever through them. And so I really believe that the way that we heal our world and, living in America, my community, our country is really broken right now. And it's really sad to see not just the left and the right fighting, but I have great friends and family that are some of the kindest, smartest, loving people I know that are at odds with each other because they don't understand some of the truths of leadership. They might be great shooters, they might be great dribbles and passers, but yet the community is broken because of their lack of understanding of these natural forces, just like gravity and ground reaction force, mass momentum, sciences on planet Earth that allow us to love each other. And so I just think that leadership's so important. And then when we take it to basketball, I would even argue even to be a great basketball player is the most important skill, because we know that the best teams are not the ones with the best players. If that was the case, we could just get a lot of money and would just pick the best 5 players, and then we would win the championship. We wouldn't even have to have an NBA season. There'd be no reason to play the game. But we know that's not true, because if you have 5 players on the team that don't work well together, that are jealous of each other, that are resentful, that one person wants the shot, the other one wants the game-winning shot, so then they're going to fight, the team falls apart. They don't win. And so if the goal of basketball is not to, have the most MVPs or not to have the scoring title, but if the goal of basketball is to win in a championship, then I really believe leadership is the most important skill. And so I'm just a huge believer in us as strength coaches. This is an area where we can really give back to our program, because we're not going to be able to help our team run their entry offense or the out of bounds plays. That's not my skill set. That's not even my place if it was my skill set. That's what the sport coaches can do. But where we can serve is we can make sure athletes are fueled well with the way they eat. We can make sure they're trained well. So when the coach says, hey, I want you to guard this guy, get in a stance, they're able to get in a stance because of what we gifted them, the mobility to drive in that position, the strength to be able to hold it, the power to be able to explode out of it. And the other thing we could do is we can gift the coaches and the team with the insights on how to love each other and how to work well with each other. And that's something that we could do all season long through intentional leadership training. And the journey really started, when I was a player and having great coaches that did that for me. I remember I was in high school. I played on varsity as a freshman. And I was really a sheltered, not confident kid. I got really the most loving parents in the world. I was kind of a homebody. I had friends spend the night, but I was, maybe too homesick to spend the night at someone else's friends. So I was kind of fragile going into high school. And my biggest fear was to have, the upperclassmen, be mean to me or pick on me. And I was so lucky because we had a high school coach, and he had something called the no knock rule. And he said, from the time you check into the locker room to the time you leave, you can't knock down one player, no put downs. Now you could tell a player, hey, you got to pass the ball there. Hey, you got to sprint and touch the line, but you have no knocks on their character. You can never say, hey, you're stupid. You're an idiot. What are you doing? None of that. And because of his influence, and his mentor was John Wooden. And so that tells you what kind of high school coaches I had. because of that, I had these juniors and seniors, these upperclassmen who took me under their wing and were kind to me. And because of that, I was able to contribute. You know, if the upperclassmen would have been mean to me, if they would have been jealous that a young kid was on varsity, I probably would have, probably would have went down to JV or freshman. I probably would have been too scared to contribute, and the team wouldn't have been as good. And so, just through my experience, seeing like this is really important stuff. And then coaching my kids, you go to any gym in America and you watch AAU, and the system's broken. We have parents screaming at not just their kids, but their kids' teammates, pass the ball. What are you doing? It's that you have parents screaming at these refs. We have teenage boys and girls reffing games for minimum wage, and they're being screamed at by these parents, and parents yelling at them, just saying the most derogatory terms. And instead of the coaches stopping this, the coaches add on to it. The coaches are swearing at these grade school, these teenage refs. And then they wonder why the kids are misbehaving. And it is absolute madness. And so I decided, well, that's the only way to change the culture is to be the change you want to see in the world. And so with my little basketball teams, my 3 kids teams, we do intentional leadership training, not just with the players every practice, but we have meetings with the parents and say, if you want to play on this team, here are the guidelines. It's not the only way. It's not the best way. This is going to be our way. And this is how you talk to your kids. And this is a really fine line to tell a parent how they can talk to their kids. But if you're going to play on my team, this is how we do it. And so don't take offense to it if you don't like it. There's other teams that don't do it this way. Matter of fact, this might be the only team that does it this way. But you never scream from the stands to tell your kid to shoot, ever. You don't tell them to pass the ball. All you do is you cheer for them. You encourage great attitude and great effort. Now it takes all the pressure off you, parents. All you have to do is just love and enjoy watching your kid play. That's it. If I hear you tell your kid to shoot, I'm probably going to have a conversation with you, and it's going to be kind, but hey, I'll tell your kid when to shoot, because yeah, he was open on the baseline, but the reason he was open was because we wanted him to pass to the guy cutting to the basket for a layup. And now you tell him to shoot. Now you've confused the kid. You've undermined the whole, philosophy of our plays. And so I know you're meaning well, but you only have one job. It makes it really easy. And here's another job. All you can do is to the ref is cheer for him. After the game, go talk to him and tell him, thank you so much for reffing so our kids can have a basketball season. Shake their hand, tell them great job. And that's all you could do. And so I think when you do that, then all of a sudden, instead of parents getting worked up and being upset, they can just have fun. It's like going to your favorite concert and just being able to watch an artist play. And so I love that idea. And then I say, you know what? And I'm going to be held to the same standards. I can promise you this. I'm going to make mistakes coaching, but you will never, ever hear me call the ref a bad name. You will never see me disrespect a ref. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to tell them when they missed a call. I'll say, hey, actually this happened. I'm going to say it in a nice, respectful way. And that's how our kids are going to learn how to interact with each other, with coaches, with the fans, with the players. And so we do intentional leadership training with the teams. And what's really cool is it makes it not just a great environment for me as a coach and for the players. I've actually had parents come up to me and say, thank you so much. This is the first year I actually enjoyed watching my kid play. I don't have to drive home worked up about, should I tell my kid he did this or that? I just got to love my child. And I think what's great is, when you looked at the previous year when they were yelling at their kid is not going to flourish in that kind of environment. So with this, when you really put leadership at the forefront of what you coach, everyone wins. It's not just everyone wins because we're happy. People become better basketball players and you win more. And so I'm just a huge fan of just being intentional with leadership.
Is there something that you do to assess leadership?
Yeah, we do the simplest form of complexity with leadership as well. I really believe if you tell me, hey, tell me about colors. And if the first thing I say about colors is, well, there's magenta and there's midnight sky blue and there's baby blue, I'm probably too confused. I'm in the weeds with colors. But if you ask me about colors, and the first thing I say is, there's only 3 colors that make up every color that we see on planet Earth. You probably think, you probably know that I have a good understanding of the big picture of colors. And so what I've done is I've created 3 levels of leadership. And then what we do to assess it is the same thing that I do with nutrition or anything else. We make sure that everyone understands there is a progression. There is a science to leadership, just like there's a science to training and just like there's a science to nutrition. And the science for basketball leadership is pretty clear, in my opinion. This is not the only system. It's just the system that I think works. And it's just like a video game. The only way you could be a level 2 leader is if you're a level 1 leader. And the only way we should ever be talking about level 3 is if you've mastered both level 1 and level 2 of leadership. And level 1 of leadership is synergy. It's your ability to create relationships with other people. And here's why this is so important, is because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so if leadership is just influence, and I really believe that's what leadership is, if we want to make it really simple, you can't be a great leader if you don't know what leadership is. And in my opinion, the way I define it is leadership is influence. And so the better leader I am, the more influence I have on people around me. Now, I might not have to be a great leader in my home because I have force. I have 3 little kids. Go clean your room, do the dishes, make your bed. I don't have to have any influence because I just could tell them, this is what you're going to do. And I'm big and strong enough to make them do it. That doesn't work in basketball. I could be the biggest, strongest, best player in the world. If I don't have influence over my teammates, my words aren't going to have very much power. I'm not going to be able to influence them and help them become their best. And so level 1, synergy, is your ability to create relationships, to bond with those people around you. And if you do that well, you could be a great leader. The best level 1 leader I've ever seen is a guy by the name of Andrew Sorensen. And he was a walk-on at Gonzaga. In his first 3 years, he doesn't play 1 second. But by his senior year, Coach Few gives him a full ride scholarship with over $50,000 because of the synergy he was able to create with his teammates. Those 6 a.m. workouts where everyone's tired. Well, when Andrew was there was more energy because he was constantly cheering people on, right? Picking people up. In the locker room, where people might want to maybe have their hoods on with their earbuds in and everyone kind of goes their own separate ways. With Andrew, there was none of that. Everyone was connected. Like if you had your hood on, he'd pull it off and tackle you. And next thing you know, everyone's laughing and having fun. And those are the things that really gel teams together. And Coach Few saw that, right? Because Andrew was this walk-on that didn't play at all. He had a huge impact on the team. His influence was wide because every single person on that team respected him. And that's why he was a great level 1 leader. And if you do that well, you earn the right to become a level 2 leader, which is sweat, which is your ability to lead by example through hard work, through blood, sweat, and tears. And those are things like, coming up to practice, going to practice early and working on your ball handling, winning your conditioning drill, staying after shooting free throws. Like that, working hard is super important. But if you don't have a connection with your teammates, that stuff goes unnoticed. As a matter of fact, I've even seen it backfire. We had one of our best players, all-league player, great person, a great person, but maybe didn't have a great connection with their teammates, right? They didn't have any personal connection to a point where they kind of fought with all the teammates. They were kind of a cancer a little bit. And because of that, that person would go in and shoot free throws. They were not leading by example because their teammates would walk in the gym, see this person shooting and be like, you know what? I'll come back and shoot later. They didn't want to be in the gym with this teammate because that person had no ability to connect with those around him. And so that's why I think the only way to be a level 2 leader is to be a level 1 leader, because you could be the greatest player in the world, but if you don't have synergy with your teammates, you're just a great player. You're not a leader. But the only problem, the reason why leading by example is not the highest form of leadership is because the only problem with leading by example is it only works if people are there to watch. And what I found is the people that need the most help usually aren't looking for it. And so that's why you need the level 3 leader, the servant leader. So we have synergy, sweat, and serve. And to serve means to tell teammates what they need to hear with love. You don't yell at them because you hate them or you're mad at them. You yell at them because it's for the good of the team. You're instructing them because you care enough about them and the program to say what they need to hear. And boy, that's a really, really challenging, high level of leadership. I only played with a few level 3 leaders in my whole career. But if you get to that point, you can really change people. And so you ask me, how do I assess leaders? Well, we take 18 weeks to take our whole team through the 3 levels of leadership. And we define exactly the core values of synergy. And so there's a lot of way to make connections with your team. But on our team at Gonzaga basketball, we say that inclusion's number 1, gratitude's number 2, and enthusiasm's number 3. Those are the 3 ways that we create the energy of synergy. So if you're not practicing inclusion, then you're not a level 1 leader. If you don't have an attitude of gratitude in our program, you're not a leader. If you're not enthusiastic, you might be a great player, but you're not a leader. And so we work 2 weeks on inclusion. We tell the athletes exactly what they should think about inclusion, what inclusive players say, and what inclusive players do. And so after 6 weeks of working on level 1, this is how we assess them. We have 30 questions that we give to the players, and they get to, answer questions. They get to self-assess. Do I show up early to practice, with a good attitude? If you don't check yes to that, well, then you're not a level 1 leader, right? And so that's kind of a nice way for us to be able to see where they think they're at and be able to fill in the gaps for them. We do that for 6 weeks for synergy, 6 weeks for sweat. It's the same thing. You can't say you're a level 2 leader unless you can answer yes to most of these 30 questions. And they're about things like grit, growth mindset, taking initiative. And we define those things for our athletes. And so it's pretty in depth. And I know people might be listening saying, that's a lot. But this, we only spend 5 to 10 minutes 3 times a week. So every other practice for the first 5 to 10 minutes, we work on leadership. And then what's really cool is now we have a 2.5 or 3 hour practice. For the next 2 hours, we're just reinforcing that 5-minute talk we gave. And so even though we're only intentionally teaching it for that 5 minutes to lay it out, for the next 2 weeks, we just get to reinforce it over and over and over again. And by the end of a season, you have a team full of grateful, enthusiastic, gritty, people with growth mindset. You've worked on that, right? And you can't expect to have a team full of great shooters if you never work on shooting. You can't expect to have a team full of great ball handlers if you never take time to teach ball handling and let them practice it. And so you'll never have a team of great leaders if you don't take time to intentionally teach it and practice it. So that's our 18-week leadership program. And what's cool is the freshmen that go through it 1 year, they come back as sophomores and they get to dig deeper. And as juniors, they dig deeper. And so by the time someone leaves us after 4 years, they're not just great basketball players. They're great teammates. They're great people that can go and contribute to society. So I think it's way bigger than the game of basketball.
Well, Mike, I really like your philosophy, and I love your system. You have shared so many tips with us. I am pretty sure that our listeners will be more than happy. We usually finish off the episode with 3 rapid-fire questions. You ready?
Bring it on.
All right. What's your favorite meal when it comes to cheat day?
I'm a huge cheeseburger fan. And so there's a restaurant we just discovered in quarantine. I'd never been to it before. And they make the best burgers and sweet potato waffle fries. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I have way too many cheat days now that I discovered this restaurant. It's not only my favorite, it's my kids and my wife's favorite too.
A dunk or a defensive stop?
Now that's a loaded question because, of course, I would prefer to dunk, but what am I really going to do? I'm going to get a defensive stop. And so, I think you can't win a basketball game if you don't score. And so the dunk is pretty important. Unfortunately, I only had about 10 of those in my whole college career, but I had a lot of defensive stops, so I got to go with that one.
Best book ever?
Living Buddha, Living Christ. And it's a book that is just full of truths that transcend sport and religion, and they're just loving truths that help me get closer to my family, to my friends, to people of all different faiths. And I think it's one of the greatest gifts ever given to the earth by someone named Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
All right, great. Mike, where can our listeners find more about you?
Go to hoopcommitment.com. I got a great podcast. called Hoop Commitment that my boy Roberto is going to be on here in the near future. I'm really excited that he agreed to do that. You can find me on social media at Hoop Commitment. I'd love to be able to, have you connect, learn from you guys too. Like I said, I just have my system. The cool thing about the system is I'm constantly adding techniques. I'm constantly learning from you, Roberto. So I would love to be able to connect with other strength coaches and have them enhance my system so we can help our athletes.
And I'm constantly learning from you too. So, Mike, thanks for taking the time and hanging out with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. A huge honor, and thanks for your friendship.